The whisper reached Maren Holloway before she had finished crossing the marble threshold of Ravenscombe Hall, and it cut deeper than any blade her father had ever forged in his shop. That is the one. The seamstress girl. Can you imagine? She did not turn her head. She had spent the last 7 days learning not to turn her head. Lady Hesper Vaughan had drilled her in the art of stillness, with the same severity that other women used to drill their daughters in needlework. Chin level. Shoulders open. Eyes forward. Never let them see you break. The grand entrance hall was lit by 1,000 candles, and the scent of beeswax and hothouse lilies hung thick in the warm air. The other guests, all velvet and silk and quiet aristocratic confidence, parted around her in a slow current. She was simply moved past, the way river water moves past a stone. A second whisper, closer this time. He must have lost a wager, or his senses. There is no other explanation for bringing a tradesman's daughter to a gala of this rank. Maren kept walking. Her gloves were borrowed. Her gown of pale blue silk had been altered in 3 places. The single pearl at her throat had belonged to her mother, who had been dead for 11 years. Tonight, that pearl was the only thing on her person that was truly hers, and she pressed her thumb against the chain at her collarbone for the comfort of feeling it there. 7 days ago, she had been measuring fabric by candlelight in her father's shop on Cobbler's Row, hemming a wedding gown and trying not to think about the eviction notice tucked beneath the till. 7 days ago, she had not yet met Lady Hesper Vaughan, who had walked into the shop at dusk to retrieve a torn cloak, and had walked back out an hour later with a young woman whose stitching was finer than any court embroiderer's. 6 days ago, Lady Hesper had offered her the position, companion, live at Whitmore House. There had been only one condition. You will accompany me to the Ravenscombe Gala. Whatever they say, you will not break. Tonight Maren understood why. She would not. A third whisper, louder than the first 2 combined, came from a knot of women near a marble pillar wreathed in ivy. His Grace must have lost his mind. To bring her here, of all evenings. They are calling her his mistake already, and the music has not even begun. The word landed in her chest like a coin dropped into deep water. Mistake. Across the hall, near the head of the receiving line, the Duke of Ravenscombe stood with his hands folded behind his back, and Maren, against every instruction, allowed herself one full glance at him. He was not smiling. She had not, in truth, expected him to be. He was a tall man, perhaps 34, with hair the color of wet slate and a jaw sculpted to refuse softness. His coat tonight was the deep, sober green of a winter forest. He stood among gilded earls and braided generals, and looked more dangerous than any of them, simply by being still. And he was looking at her. He was looking at her in a way that suggested he had been listening to every whisper in the room since the moment she had stepped through the door. Behind her, Lady Hesper, delayed at the door, finally caught up. "Walk on, my dear," Lady Hesper murmured at her elbow. "We are nearly to your seat." They proceeded down the long hall. Maren did not look at the Duke again. Lady Hesper walked beside her, one gloved hand resting at the small of her back, and Maren understood that the hand was not guidance. It was a shield. They reached the inner drawing room. Lady Hesper was drawn into conversation by a dowager in lavender silk. Maren, free for a single moment, drifted toward a tall window and let herself breathe. That was where she heard the 4th whisper. The one that did not come from a stranger. It came from a woman she could see in the polished glass of the window, reflected behind her 2 paces back. The woman wore crimson and a string of rubies that must have cost more than Cobbler's Row had earned in a decade. Her voice was pitched precisely loud enough to carry. "I do hope someone has told the poor creature that the Duke is not in the habit of marrying his charity cases. The last one ended very badly. Surely Lady Hesper would not be so cruel as to let her hope." The sound that left Maren's throat was the absence of a sound. She turned. She had not planned to turn. But something in her, older than 7 days of training and stronger than 11 years of grief, simply turned her body for her, and her chin lifted of its own accord. "Forgive me," Maren said, voice clear and level, "but I believe you have mistaken me for someone in need of your sympathy. I am not. I am a guest in this house. and I have been welcomed by the only people whose welcome I require." The woman in crimson stared at her as if a footstool had spoken. Lady Hesper across the room turned at the sound of Maren's voice. So did 3 other heads. So did, Maren realized, with a slow, cold drop of her stomach, the Duke himself, who had moved at some point from the receiving line to the doorway of the drawing room and was now standing not 20 paces from her, perfectly silent, his gray eyes fixed on her face with an expression she could not read. He had heard her. He had heard the woman in crimson. He had, she suspected, heard every whisper in the hall. The drawing room was very quiet. The Duke of Ravenscombe inclined his head, slightly, in Maren's direction. It was not a bow. It was something smaller and more precise, the acknowledgement a master swordsman gives to an opponent who has just made an unexpected move. Then he turned to the woman in crimson, and his voice, when he spoke, was so quiet that the room had to lean in to hear it. "Lady Brockton," he said, "I believe my mother has been searching for you. She has a question regarding the seating at supper. I am sure you will not wish to keep her waiting." The woman in crimson went the color of her gown. She curtsied, badly, and fled. The Duke turned on his heel and walked from the drawing room without another word. Lady Hesper appeared at Maren's side a moment later, took her hand, and squeezed it once. "Come," she said softly. "We will sit." Maren let herself be led to a velvet chair near the fire. Her knees, she discovered, had been shaking the whole time. She had not noticed. "You did not break," Lady Hesper said. I turned. "You said never to turn. You showed them iron. That is something else entirely. They have already given you a name. They will use it." "Mistake," Maren whispered. "Yes. Why did you bring me here, knowing this?" "Because the Duke required a reason to remember who he is, and because I required a reason to believe I had not been wrong about him. Tonight has answered both questions, and we have not yet reached the first dance." Maren sat very still in the velvet chair, her mother's pearl resting cool against her throat, and tried to understand what had just been said to her. She knew that she had been called a mistake in front of 300 people, and that the Duke of Ravenscombe had heard every word, and that for reasons she did not yet comprehend, he had chosen to answer on her behalf. She also knew that he was going to want to speak with her before the night was through. The summons came at the hush between the 4th and 5th dances, when the orchestra paused to retune. A footman appeared at Lady Hesper's elbow. Lady Hesper nodded once. "His Grace requests a word," she said quietly. "In the Green Library. I will accompany you to the door. I will not enter." Maren rose. She followed Lady Hesper along a side passage hung with old portraits, whose painted eyes seemed to follow her without warmth. They reached a heavy door of dark walnut. Lady Hesper laid one gloved hand against it. "He will be brusque. He has not learned another way in some years. Do not mistake the manner for the meaning. Speak as you spoke in the drawing room." She rapped twice. From within came a single word. "Enter." Maren stepped inside. The door closed behind her, soft as a sigh. The Green Library was a long, narrow room, walled in books from floor to ceiling, with a single tall window at the far end that looked out over a moonlit terrace. A fire burned low in a stone hearth, and a green-shaded lamp stood on a writing desk, casting a pool of light across a scatter of unopened letters. The Duke stood at the window with his back to her, one hand resting on the sill. He did not turn at once. "You spoke without permission tonight," he said. "Yes, Your Grace. To one of the most powerful women in 3 counties. Yes, Your Grace. You were warned against precisely that. I was, Your Grace." He turned then. The lamplight caught the side of his face and softened nothing about it. "Then why, Miss Holloway?" "Because if I had not spoken, the next girl Lady Hesper brings into a room of that kind would have heard the same words said about her and would have believed them true, because no one had ever stood up and said otherwise. I cannot speak for that future girl. I can only speak for myself, and I am not what Lady Brockton called me. You are a tradesman's daughter. Yes, a seamstress. Yes, Your Grace, a good one. Your father is a saddler. He works in leather. I work in cloth. We share a shop on Cobbler's Row, in the parish of St. Aldwyn, where my mother is buried. My mother was the daughter of a curate. She read 4 languages and taught me 3 of them before she died. I was 11. Since then, I have kept the ledger of my father's shop and taken in mending to keep us housed. Lady Hesper found me 1 week ago because she tore the lining of a cloak. I did not seek her. I did not seek you. I sought only to mend the cloak and be paid for it." The Duke was very still while she spoke. When she had finished, the silence was so complete that Maren could hear the soft collapse of a coal in the grate. "Sit down," he said. She sat. He moved to the writing desk and rested both hands flat upon it. "I owe you an explanation. My mother lost her younger sister, my aunt, 8 years ago, to a man who married her for her dowry and discarded her for a woman with a larger one. My aunt did not survive the discarding. Since that day, my mother has made it her quiet business to find young women who stand at the edge of ruin and to offer them what my aunt was not: a door, a name to walk under, a year of safety. Lady Hesper has joined her in this work. Together they have helped 17 young women in 8 years. You, Miss Holloway, are the 18th. Maren's hands tightened in her lap. "I did not know. You were not meant to know tonight. You were meant to be presented, observed, and returned safely to Whitmore House before any decision about your future was required. Lady Brockton was not part of the plan. Neither was your answer to her. Both, I find, have altered the evening considerably." He looked up. "I am told they are calling you my mistake." "Yes, Your Grace. You are not my mistake. You are not anyone's mistake. The mistake in this hall tonight is the woman in crimson, and she will learn the size of it slowly. That is not your concern. Your concern is what I am about to say to you, and I require that you listen carefully because I will not say it twice. The 17 women before you were sheltered quietly. Their names were never spoken in rooms like the one beyond that door. Yours has been. Within an hour, every house in this county will know of you. Within a week, every house in 3. We cannot put that whisper back in the bottle. We can only decide what to do with the bottle now that it is open." "You wish me to leave," Maren said. "No." The single word fell into the room and stayed there. "I wish," the Duke said slowly, "for you to remain at Whitmore House under my mother's protection. I wish you to be presented at the next 3 galas of the season, in gowns my mother will provide. I wish the women of this county to grow accustomed to seeing your face and hearing your voice, until the word they invented for you tonight no longer fits in their mouths. Why? Because my aunt died because no one in a room like the one beyond that door spoke for her when it would have cost them something to do so. I have been the master of this estate for 6 years, and I have been a coward in precisely the way the men around her were cowards. Tonight, you spoke for yourself when no one else would. My mother suggests I might consider doing the same, occasionally, for someone other than myself." Maren discovered that she could not speak. "There will be conditions. You will not leave Whitmore House without Lady Hesper or my mother. You will not write letters outside the household without showing them first. You will not attempt to defend yourself in public again without instruction. Yes, Your Grace. You may, at any moment, withdraw. A coach will be made ready. You will be returned to Cobbler's Row with a sum sufficient to purchase the lease on the shop outright. That offer stands tonight, tomorrow, and every morning after. Yes, Your Grace. Then go back to the dancing. Do not look for me again tonight." She rose. Her knees, she found, were steady this time. She crossed to the door. With her hand on the latch, she paused and turned. "Your Grace." He looked up. "You said you would not say it twice. I have heard it once. That is enough." For the first time that evening, something in the Duke's face shifted. It was not a smile. It was the smallest possible loosening at the corner of his mouth, the thing that happens to a man when a stone he has been carrying becomes, for a single breath, slightly lighter. "Then go," he said. "And, Miss Holloway, yes, Your Grace, you are not a mistake. Whatever they call you for the rest of this season, remember that I have said so. I do not say things I do not mean." Maren stepped out, closed the door behind her, and stood for a moment in the corridor, her hand pressed flat against the cool wood, breathing as though she had run a great distance. Lady Hesper was waiting at the corridor's end. She held out her arm. Maren took it, and together they walked back toward the music. She did not sleep that night. She lay in the four-poster bed in the rose-papered guest room at Whitmore House and watched the moon move slowly across the upper pane, and she turned the Duke's words over in her mind until they wore smooth. You are not a mistake. I do not say things I do not mean. By morning, she had decided that she would earn the words, not deserve them, which felt too large a thing to claim, but earn them, day by day, until the doing of it became a kind of answer. Whitmore was smaller than Ravenscombe and warmer, a square stone manor of 3 stories set in a park of beeches. Lady Hesper introduced her to the household one by one. Mrs. Pendero, the housekeeper, regarded Maren with the open suspicion that older servants reserve for younger women whose presence has not yet been satisfactorily explained. Mr. Calder, the butler, did not regard her at all, which Maren understood to be the more aristocratic version of the same opinion. You will win them, Lady Hesper said, not by charming them, by being useful and not making a fuss. Mrs. Pendero values usefulness above almost any other virtue, and Mr. Calder values silence. You possess both. I would like to be useful. I know. That is why you are here. Lady Hesper led her into a small writing room at the south end of the house, where a desk was set beneath a window and a fire had been lit in a tiled hearth. This will be your work. The household correspondence, the menus, the orders to the village suppliers. Mrs. Pendero has been managing it badly, because she is a housekeeper and not a clerk. You will lift it from her hands. You will be gentle about the lifting. By the end of the month, she will be your defender. Lady Hesper left her. Maren sat down at the desk, opened the leather folder, and felt for the first time since she had arrived a sensation she recognized. Numbers. Columns. The clean, honest grammar of a ledger. It took her 2 hours to find the first error. By noon, she had identified 4 irregularities. A weekly delivery of candles billed for 16 pounds of beeswax when only 12 had reached the cellar. A wine merchant charging the London rate for a vintage from a vineyard 10 miles away. A coal supplier quoting in long hundredweights and invoicing in short, and someone undercharging the household for linens by 3 shillings a quarter. She wrote each finding on a single sheet, blotted it, and set it aside. When she looked up, Mrs. Pendero was standing in the doorway. I came to ask whether you wanted tea. I see you have been working. A little. Mrs. Pendero's eyes went to the paper. Maren slid it toward her. Would you tell me whether any of these seems wrong before I trouble her ladyship? The housekeeper read it. On the 4th finding, the small, quiet one about the linens, Maren saw Mrs. Pendero's jaw tighten in a way that told her she had stumbled onto something the housekeeper already knew. That last is not an error. It is a kindness from a man who was once a footman in this house and is now a draper in his own right. He has charged us at a discount for 19 years. Her ladyship knows. He did not wish to be thanked. Then it should be in the books, Maren said, listed under a line of its own. Otherwise the accounts will not balance, and someone less careful than you will one day discover it and assume something less generous. Mrs. Pendero set the paper back on the desk with a precision that was almost respectful. I will bring tea. She left. Maren, alone again, allowed herself the smallest smile she had permitted herself in 7 days. The smile lasted until the afternoon, when the second event of the day arrived in the south garden. She had stepped out, at Lady Hesper's direction, to take air before the light went. The pear wall ran the full length of the garden's southern edge, and at the far end of it stood a small stone bench. As she approached, she heard a low murmur of voices, and stopped. The voices belonged to the Duke and a small boy of perhaps 7, in a coat too large for him, sitting on the bench with his legs swinging. The Duke did not see her. The boy was telling him something about a bird with a broken wing. Then the Duke reached into the inside pocket of his coat and drew out a folded square of cloth. He opened it to reveal a heel of bread and a small piece of cheese. Eat, he said. Then we will go and see your bird. Maren stepped backward into the shelter of the pear wall and walked the other way, taking care that her feet made no sound. She did not know who the boy was, but she carried the picture with her, the Duke of Ravenscombe with a child's piece of cheese in his pocket, and added it to the small collection of things she now knew about him that the women in crimson and rubies did not. That evening at supper, Lady Hesper said. Mrs. Pendero has spoken to me. In 19 years, she has spoken to me about a new companion exactly. Never. She spoke today. She said only one thing. The girl sees. Thank you, my lady. There is one more matter. Tomorrow evening a letter will arrive for you. It will not be from me. It will not be from His Grace. Bring it to me at first light the morning after. A letter. From whom? That, my dear, is the question I would like you to bring me along with the letter. Good night. The letter arrived at 4:30, while Maren was still bent over the household correspondence with a goose quill in her hand. It came by a thin, red-haired girl named Wren, who curtsied at the door and held out the envelope on a silver tray as though it might bite her. For Miss Holloway. From a gentleman at the gate. He would not give a name. He said you would know the hand. Maren took the envelope. The paper was cheap, and the seal was a smear of ordinary red wax pressed with a coin rather than a signet. The hand was plain, careful, schoolmasterly, and it was not a hand she knew. Thank you, Wren. There will be no reply today. Wren left. Maren sat for a long minute looking at the envelope. Then, against every word of Lady Hesper's instruction, she opened it. Miss Holloway, the letter began, you do not know me. I knew your mother when she was a girl in the parish of St. Aldwyn, before she married. I have learned that you are now at Whitmore House, under the protection of Lady Hesper Vaughan. I am glad of it. There are things your mother wished you to know that she did not live to tell you. I will be at the Bell and Ivy in the village of Lanthorpe on the 3rd Sunday of this month, and on no other day. I will wait from noon to the close of the afternoon service. If you do not come, I will not write again. If you do, bring no one, a friend of your mother's. Maren read it twice. Then she folded it back along its creases, slid it inside the cover of the household ledger, and sat very still while the fire made a small, busy sound in the grate. A friend of her mother's. Her mother had been dead 11 years. Maren had never once considered that her mother might have had a life before Cobbler's Row that contained people who were still alive. The 3rd Sunday was 9 days away. She did not bring the letter to Lady Hesper at first light, nor the morning after. Underneath all her small, reasonable arguments, a harder thing sat very still and refused to be argued with. She wanted, before she gave the letter to anyone, to know what it said for herself. On the 3rd evening after its arrival, she was in the green saloon with a basket of mending in her lap, repairing a torn flounce on one of Lady Hesper's morning gowns. When she became aware that someone was standing in the doorway, she looked up, and her needle stopped in mid-stitch. The Duke was watching her work. She had not seen him since the Green Library at Ravenscombe. She had not expected to see him at Whitmore at all. He was in riding clothes, and his hair was damp with the fine gray rain that had been falling all afternoon. Your Grace, she said, and rose, the mending sliding from her knee. Sit. I am not staying. I am here to see my mother. I came in by the garden door because I did not wish to be announced. He stepped into the saloon. He did not sit. You are quite well, Miss Holloway? Quite well, Your Grace. You have been seen, this week, in the village. Once, with Lady Hesper. Yes. I am told you spoke to a child in the haberdashers who had spilled a paper of pins and helped her gather them up before the haberdasher saw, and paid for them yourself with a coin from your pocket, so that the child would not be beaten when she went home. Is this an accurate account? Maren's face went hot. The pins were 3 pence, Your Grace. It was a thing, the Duke said. The haberdasher's wife told my coachman, who told my valet, who told me before I had finished pulling on my 2nd boot this morning. He paused. I came to thank you for the fact that the child is not, this evening, being beaten. Miss Holloway, may I ask you a question that I have no right to ask? You may ask, Your Grace. I will decide whether I have the right to answer. The corner of his mouth shifted, almost detectable. Have you been well treated? In this house? Yes, Your Grace. He nodded. If that should ever cease to be true, you will tell me. Not Lady Hesper, not my mother. Me, directly. Is that understood? It is understood, Your Grace. He turned to go. At the door he paused. Maren, he said. It was the first time he had used her given name. Yes, Your Grace. You spoke at Ravenscombe like a woman who had practiced courage for a long time before that night. I do not believe one practices courage in a saddler's shop on Cobbler's Row without a reason. I shall not ask the reason. I only wish you to know that I have noticed there is one." She sat with the mending in her lap for a long time. Her hands did not shake. Her face was perfectly still. But somewhere beneath her ribs, a small private place had grown a little wider, and a little softer, and a little harder to defend. She slid the letter deeper into the lining of her sleeve, and she went up to bed, and she lay awake counting the days until the third Sunday. 6. The second letter came on the morning of the fifth day, and the second letter changed everything. Moren was at her desk when Mr. Calder appeared in the doorway with an envelope and an expression she had not seen him wear before. Today he wore something close to apology. "For you, miss," brought up from the gate by the postboy. "The hand is unfamiliar to me." "Thank you, Mr. Calder." He did not leave at once. He stood in the doorway and said, very quietly, "Lady Hesper is in the morning room, miss, should you require her." He left. Moren looked at the envelope. The hand was a hand she knew. She had seen it on receipts and on bills, and once, when she was 14, on a list of her own faults pinned to the wall of the kitchen for a week. Her uncle, Silas Holloway, who had not spoken to her father in 9 years and who had been the largest reason, when she was a child, that she had learned to walk softly past closed doors. She broke the seal. "Moren, I have heard, by a cousin who heard from a coachman, that you have placed yourself in the house of a Lady Vaughan under the protection of the Duke of Ravenscombe. I take leave to doubt the protection. Your father owes me £140, which he borrowed at the time of your mother's burying and has not repaid in 11 years. The lease falls due for renewal at Lady Day. I hold the paper. If the sum is not paid by the third Sunday of this month, I shall foreclose, and I shall make the matter public in a manner that will reach the houses of Whitmore and Ravenscombe. There is a kinder remedy. Return to Cobbler's Row. Marry the man I have already named to your father. His settlement will clear the debt. You have until the third Sunday. Your obedient uncle, S. Holloway." The third Sunday. The same Sunday. The day the friend of her mother had named at the Bell and Ivy in Lanthorpe. It was not coincidence. Her uncle did not believe in coincidences. He had decided that the third Sunday would be the point at which her life, and her father's, broke open like a walnut under a hammer. She did not go to Lady Hesper at once. She went to the south garden. She walked the length of the pear wall twice in the cold spring air without a shawl. She came back into the house with her thoughts in the order she required them to be in, and she went to the morning room and asked Lady Hesper for a private hour. Lady Hesper looked up from her embroidery, took one full look at Moren's face, and set the embroidery aside. "I have not been honest with you. The first arrived 4 days ago. The second came an hour past. They are connected. I did not know they would be." Lady Hesper read the letter from the friend of Moren's mother first, then the letter from Silas Holloway. Then she placed them both back on the table between them with the careful gentleness of a woman handling something she fully intended, in a moment, to set on fire. "You should have brought me the first the morning after it came." "Yes, my lady. Why did you not?" "Because," Moren said, "my mother died 11 years ago, and a stranger has just told me she had a life I did not know about, and I wished, before I gave that to anyone else, to know what it was." Lady Hesper looked at her for a weighing moment. "And what do you wish to do?" "I wish to meet the friend of my mother on Sunday. I wish my father not to lose his shop. I wish not to marry the man my uncle has chosen. I will not walk back into the house my uncle is standing in. I would rather sleep in the street. If you wish me to leave Whitmore by tomorrow, I will leave, but I will not be sent home." "I will not send you home," Lady Hesper said. Moren let out a breath she had not known she was holding. "But I will not," Lady Hesper continued, "conceal this from his grace. He has ears and means we do not. You will tell him what you have told me. You will tell him today. He will be angry that I withheld the first letter." "He will be angry. Yes. He will also, in the end, do what is required. That is who he is, beneath the anger." The Duke arrived at Whitmore an hour and a half later. He walked into the morning room, took one look at the 2 letters laid on the table, and read them in silence. When he had finished, he turned to Moren. "You had the first for 4 days." "I did, Your Grace." You were instructed to bring it to Lady Hesper at first light. I was. I disobeyed. Did you intend, at any point in those 4 days, to go to the Bell and Ivy without telling anyone in this house? She did not lie. Yes, Your Grace, for 2 of the 4 days. On the 3rd, I began to think differently. I had not yet decided when the second letter came. He nodded. You are honest. That is the only reason I am still in this room. The uncle is a problem we can solve. The debt is £140. I will instruct my solicitor to discharge it tomorrow. The lease will be transferred into Miss Holloway's name and held in trust for her father. Silas Holloway will be informed that any further communication will be answered by the magistrate of his parish. The friend of your mother is a different matter. I do not propose to forbid the meeting. I propose that you not go to it alone. Lady Hesper will accompany you. She will sit at a separate table at the Bell and Ivy. She will only be in the room. Morin could not, for a moment, speak. I find them, she said at last, very generous, Your Grace. They are not generous. They are practical. You are useful to this household, and you have, as of this afternoon, demonstrated that you are also honest under pressure, which is a rarer thing. I do not propose to lose either trait to a debt of £140 and an uncle with delusions of authority. He rose. One thing more, Miss Holloway. The next time a letter comes to you in this house from a hand you do not know, you will bring it to Lady Hesper or to my mother or to me within the hour. I require only that we know it has come. We are understood, Your Grace. He left. Morin discovered that she was crying, quietly, and that Lady Hesper had crossed the room and taken her hand. He did not send me away. No, my dear. I thought he would. He thought he would, too. We have all of us, this afternoon, surprised ourselves. On the Saturday before the 3rd Sunday, the village of Lanthorpe held its spring market, and Lady Hesper, who believed in distraction as a form of medicine, declared that they would go. We will buy ribbons, she said, and we will eat hot chestnuts, and we will not discuss tomorrow until tomorrow arrives. The market was set up along both sides of the green. Lady Hesper bought ribbons. Morin bought, with her own first wages, a small twist of lavender soap, because her mother had used lavender soap, and the smell of it on the market air had stopped her in the middle of the green like a hand on her shoulder. It was as they were walking back toward the carriage that they heard the shouting. It came from the far corner of the green. A man's voice raised in anger, a woman's voice raised in protest, and beneath both, the smaller, frantic sound of a child crying. Lady Hesper was already moving. Morin, who had been raised to walk away from shouting, found that she was moving too. The crowd at the cattle pens had drawn back into a loose circle. At the center stood a tall, thin man in a brown coat, holding a small girl of perhaps 8 by the upper arm, in a grip that had turned the child's skin white where the fingers met. The girl was crying without sound. A woman, plainly the child's mother, was pulling at the man's other sleeve. Please, sir. She did not mean it. Please, sir. It was an accident. What is the matter here? Lady Hesper said. The crowd parted for her. The man in the brown coat did not let go of the child's arm. He turned, saw Lady Hesper, and said in clipped tones, This child has stolen an apple from my stall. I am within my rights to take her to the constable. The child, said Lady Hesper, is 8 years old. The apple, I assume, is a penny. 2 pence. 2 pence, then. I will pay you 4 pence, and you will let her go. The man's face hardened. With respect, my lady, this is a matter of principle. Morin saw it before Lady Hesper did. The child's left wrist was already bruised. The bruise was yellowing at the edges, and it had the shape of a thumb pressed in hard. The mother saw Morin see it. The mother's face crumpled. He is not her father, the mother whispered. He is my husband. He is not her father. Morin understood, in that instant, several things at once. The child had not stolen the apple. The mother had stolen it and put it into the child's pocket so that, if they were caught, the punishment would fall on the smaller body and not the larger one. The man in the brown coat was not the apple's owner at all. He was someone the family knew, and he had taken the chance to put a hand on the child in public for reasons that had nothing to do with 2 pence. She stepped forward before she had decided to. Sir, the child did not steal the apple. The man's eyes flicked to her. His grip on the child's arm tightened. "And who are you?" "I am Miss Maren Holloway. I am a guest at Whitmore House. I am traveling today with Lady Hesper Vaughn, whom you have just addressed. I am telling you, sir, that the child did not steal the apple, because I saw who did, and it was not she. It was a lie. She had not seen anything. But she said it the way she had said, 'You have mistaken me for someone in need of your sympathy at the gala.' And the man in the brown coat heard the same iron in it that Lady Brockton had heard, and his fingers loosened on the child's arm by a single, telling degree. Lady Hesper, beside her, did not look at her. Lady Hesper had gone very still in the way of a woman watching a card she did not deal turn up the right color. "Then who," said the man slowly, "did steal the apple?" "I did," said Maren. "I stole the apple. I was hungry. I am from Cobbler's Row, sir. I dropped it into the child's pocket when I saw you watching me, because I am a coward, and I am ashamed of it. And I will pay you 10 times its price now in front of these people, for having let a child stand in my place. Will that satisfy your principle, or shall we go to the constable together?" She held out her hand. In her palm lay a shilling. The man looked at the shilling. He looked at Lady Hesper. He looked at the crowd, which had grown larger and quieter, and which contained, he was beginning to realize, several faces he traded with on the other Saturdays of the year. He let go of the child's arm. "That will not be necessary," he said. "The matter is closed." He took the shilling anyway. Maren let him. The crowd opened. The mother seized her daughter's hand and was gone. Lady Hesper did not speak until they were past the last of the market and onto the open road. Then she turned and looked at Maren. "You lied. To a man you do not know, in a public square, with your name attached to the lie, to spare a child a beating. Yes, my lady." The expression on Lady Hesper's face was pride. "Then we shall not speak of it again. Not in this house. Not to his grace. The child is safe. The shilling is gone. The story is yours. But you should know that I have lived 61 years upon this earth, and I have seen perhaps a dozen people in all that time take a punishment that was not theirs in front of a crowd that would remember. They are the only people, in my experience, who are worth anything at all." But the matter did not remain in the carriage between them. By the time they had climbed the steps of Whitmore and Mr. Calder had taken their cloaks, the man in the brown coat had ridden hard from Lanthorpe to a house 3 miles to the east. The woman of that house, who happened to be the elder sister of Lady Brockton of the crimson gown, had sat down at her writing desk and begun a letter. Maren did not yet know any of this. She only knew that as she came down the stairs at 4:30, Mr. Calder was standing in the entrance hall with an envelope, and that the envelope was sealed with a crest she did not recognize, and that this time, before she even took it, he said very quietly, "I will inform her ladyship at once, miss. I have already sent word to his grace." Maren took the envelope. The wax was still warm. She did not open it. She carried it, unopened, into the morning room, set it on the table between her and Lady Hesper, and said, in a voice that had stopped being surprised at anything that arrived in this house on a tray, "I think, my lady, that tomorrow has come a day early." The envelope sat on the table between them for the length of 3 breaths before Lady Hesper picked it up. The crest is the Brockton arms, the elder branch. Maren, who had begun to recognize that the names of houses in this country were not decorations but weapons, said only, "The sister. The sister. Letitia Brockton Vane. She is not a stupid woman. She is therefore a far more dangerous one than the lady you met at Ravenscombe." She broke the seal. She read the letter without changing expression and handed it across. "Lady Hesper, it has been brought to my attention this afternoon, by a gentleman of unimpeachable reputation, that the young woman presently residing under your roof was observed in the village of Lanthorpe, publicly confessing to the theft of fruit from a market stall. I write to you in friendship, of long standing, and to express my surprise that a woman of your judgment should harbor a person of so confessed a character. I would urge you, before the gossip reaches Ravenscombe, to consider whether her continued presence does not place his grace in a position which, however generous his nature, he ought not to be asked to occupy. Yours in candor and concern, L. Brockton Vane." "She has a witness," Maren said. "She has a witness who has been paid for his witnessing." The man in the brown coat was not a stranger to the Brockton Vane household, my dear. I should have seen it at the cattle pens. I did not. That is my failure. He was placed there. Mr. Calder appeared in the doorway. His Grace, my lady. Just arrived. The Duke came in still in his riding coat. The rain had started again outside. He took one look at Lady Hesper's face, then at the letter, then at Maren, and crossed to the table without speaking and read it himself. When he had finished, he set it down. The man in the brown coat was placed? We believe so. He turned to Maren. Tell me what happened in the market. All of it, she told him. She did not soften any of it. She told him about the bruise on the child's wrist, and the lie she had spoken about the apple and the shilling she had handed over. She looked at the Duke. He listened without moving and without interrupting, and when she had finished, he was quiet for a long count. You confessed to a theft you did not commit, to spare a child a beating, without consulting Lady Hesper, knowing that any such confession in a public market would, by sundown, be known in 3 counties. I knew it might. I did it anyway. He turned away from her. He walked the length of the morning room to the fire and stood with his back to them both, looking down into the coals. You are aware, the Duke said to the fire, that you have done me a considerable injury this afternoon. Yes, Your Grace. The injury is not the confession. The injury is that within a week the question of whether the Duke of Ravenscombe shelters thieves will be debated in drawing rooms I have spent my adult life keeping out of. The injury is to my house. Do not pretend it is not. I do not pretend it is not, Your Grace. He turned. His face, in the firelight, was not angry. That was the thing that frightened her. She had braced for anger. What she saw instead was a man working out, in real time, what kind of man he intended to be. Tell me, Miss Holloway, if you stood again in that market square, with the same child and the same man and the same bruise on the same wrist, knowing what I have just said to you about my house, what would you do? Maren did not have to think. I would do the same, Your Grace. The fire made a small sound in the grate. Why? He said. Because the child is 8 years old. Because the mother put the apple in the child's pocket so that the punishment would fall where it could be survived. Because I was raised in St. Aldwyn, where I have seen children with bruises in the shape of a man's thumb, and I have walked past every time. Because I was a girl alone in a saddler's shop on a row that had no defenders. I am not, today, in such a row. I am in your protection. If your protection does not stretch to a girl of 8 in a market square with a bruise on her wrist, then I do not know what your protection is for. Lady Hesper, very softly, breathed out. The Duke did not speak for a long time. He looked at her, and his face did the small loosening at the corner of his mouth, except that this time it traveled, slowly, to his eyes, and stayed there. Then we will write back to Lady Brockton Vane, he said. Tonight, the 3 of us. We will not send a letter that begs. We will not send a letter that apologizes. We will explain, with great courtesy, exactly what happened in the market, exactly who was holding the child's arm, and exactly what the bruise looked like. We will name the man in the brown coat. We will mention that I have personally instructed my solicitor to inquire into the gentleman's references, since he appears to be free with his hand on small girls in public squares. He sat down. Lady Hesper. Paper. Pen. Miss Holloway, you will tell me, sentence by sentence, what you wish to say. I will translate it into language her ladyship will find harder to misquote. They wrote until the candles guttered. When the letter was finished and signed by all 3 of them, the Duke folded it himself and pressed his own seal into the wax. This will go by morning post. He turned to Maren. His face had returned to its usual sober register, but something behind it had not gone back where it came from. I told you, in the Green Library at Ravenscombe, that I do not say things I do not mean. I am about to say a thing I did not intend to say tonight, and I would prefer, for both our sakes, that you not answer it. She waited. You are not a person I can afford to want the good opinion of. I am informing you that I appear to want it anyway. That is all. Good night, Miss Holloway. Good night, Mother. He left. Lady Hesper gathered the spent quills and said only, You will sleep tonight if you have any sense at all. Maren went up the stairs to the rose-papered room. She lay down in her clothes. She did not weep. She put her hand against the place beneath her ribs where the small private place was, and she pressed, and she found that around it, like new wood around a wound in a tree, something else had begun, very quietly, to grow. The Bell and Ivy at Lanthorpe was an old timbered inn with a low ceiling and a tap room that smelled of beer and green wood, and the friend of Maren's mother was sitting at a corner table beneath a window of leaded glass when they arrived at noon. She was a small woman, not yet 60, dressed in plain gray. Her hair was pewter. She rose when she saw Maren. She did not curtsy. "You have your mother's mouth," she said. Maren sat across from her. Lady Hesper took a separate table at the far end of the tap room with a bowl of soup. The friend of Maren's mother gave her name as Mrs. Honor Ainsley. She had been the daughter of the curate of St. Aldwyn in the years before Maren's mother married. They had grown up in the next house. They had been each other's only friend for 16 years. "I left the parish in the year you were 7. I went north to keep house for my widowed brother. Your mother and I wrote, every month, until she died. Your father told no one when she died. I did not know for 14 months. By the time I learned you were 12, and I wrote, and the letter was returned. I wrote a second time. It was returned. The third I sent by a servant, who reported the door closed in his face. I am going to tell you a thing now that I did not know whether I would tell you. Your mother, before she married your father, was promised to another man. She was 19. He was a curate's son also, of a parish to the north of ours called Margery Heath, and his name was Edmund Vaughan. The name landed like a stone in still water. Vaughan, Maren said. Yes, of the same family as Lady Hesper, a poor branch. He was a curate's son, but the same family. He had your mother's whole heart for 2 summers. They were to marry in the autumn of her 20th year. He died in the August before the wedding, of a fever he caught from a tenant child he was sitting with through the night. She married your father 2 years later because he was a good man, and because she did not believe she would be loved again. Lady Hesper Vaughan was Edmund's half-sister. She came to St. Aldwyn for the burying. She met your mother once, at the graveside. Your mother gave her a ribbon Edmund had given her, because she said she did not deserve to keep it. Lady Hesper kept the ribbon. She has it still. When she walked into your father's shop a fortnight ago to mend a cloak, she was not mending a cloak. Maren discovered that she was crying. She wiped her face, and Mrs. Ainsley waited. Why you are telling me this today, Maren said. Because your uncle Silas Holloway has written to me also. He did not know who I was. He believed me to be a person of small consequence. He wrote to inform me that if I did not stay away from his niece, he would discover and reveal to her a thing about her mother that would break her. The thing he meant is what I have just told you. He has known of it for some years. He intended to use it to drive you back to him before you could hear it from a friend. He has miscalculated, Maren said. He has miscalculated, Mrs. Ainsley agreed. They sat together a long while. Mrs. Ainsley spoke of the sound of Maren's mother's laugh, her habit of walking barefoot in the orchard in the early morning, the lavender soap she had favored. I have a piece for you. She drew from a small reticule a folded square of paper and a length of faded blue ribbon. The paper, a letter from your mother to me. It says she hoped you would be loved one day by a man who was not afraid of being kind in front of other men. It is yours now. The ribbon is a copy of the one your mother gave Lady Hesper at the graveside. I dyed it the same color. I wished there to be something left for you in the world that was the color of the thing your mother once gave away. Maren took the ribbon. It was as soft as old water. Your uncle, he will not stop because his lordship has paid the debt. He will move to a different ground. Be watchful. She touched Maren's hand once and went out. They rode home in the carriage without speaking. Maren held the ribbon in her gloved hand. Halfway back, Lady Hesper said, without turning her face from the window, Edmund had a small white scar through his left eyebrow. Your mother used to touch the scar with her thumb when she thought no one was looking. I saw her do it once, at the graveside, before she gave me the ribbon. I thought you might wish to know. Morena did wish to know. It was not until they reached Whitmore, and Mr. Calder met them at the door with a face that had abandoned all pretense of blankness, that Moran understood the day was not over. My lady, her ladyship the dowager, she has had a turn. The physician is with her. His Grace has been sent for. Mrs. Penderrow is with her. She has been asking for Miss Holloway. Lady Hesper's hand closed on her wrist. Come, my dear. Come now. And pulled her toward the stairs. The Dowager Duchess of Ravenscombe had collapsed at 2:30 while reading a letter brought from the Morning Post. The letter was from Silas Holloway. The Dowager was awake when they reached the Blue Room, but she was very pale. The physician, Mr. Trefaro of the village, spoke quietly to Lady Hesper at the door. A small attack of the heart, not a great one. The next 24 hours will tell. She has asked for the young lady. Moren went to the bed. The Dowager turned her head on the pillow. Sit, child. Take my right hand. The left is being unhelpful. Moren sat. The hand was warm and very dry. The letter was from your uncle. He wrote to inform me of certain matters concerning your mother which he believed would horrify me. They did not. I have known of them since the day Lady Hesper came home from Cobbler's Row a fortnight ago. He did not know that I knew. The second thing. My son, you must not, Moren, allow him to ruin this by being noble. He has been trying since the night of the gala to convince himself that what he feels is duty. It is not. It is the first ordinary human feeling he has permitted himself in 6 years, and he is, as a result, behaving like a man with a fever he does not know the name of. You will tell him, when he arrives, that I have spoken to you. You will tell him I have said, in plain words, that he is to stop pretending. I understand, madam. The third thing. Lady Hesper. Yes, madam. Come closer, my dear. Lady Hesper bent over the bed. The Dowager turned her right hand and laid it for a moment against Lady Hesper's cheek. We are not finished. Promise me you will not be alarmed enough to be sentimental. I promise, said Lady Hesper. Her face was wet. Now I am going to sleep. The girl will sit with me. You will tell my son in the hall that I am not dying. The Dowager slept. The Duke arrived at 7:20. Moren heard the front doors. She heard Lady Hesper's voice in the hall, low and steady. Then there were boots on the stairs, and the door of the Blue Room opened, and the Duke came in. He did not come to the bed first. He came to Moren. He stood by her chair without speaking and looked down at his mother for a long time, and then at the joining of their two hands. And Moren understood that he was looking at it as one looks at an answer to a question one has been afraid to ask. She is going to be well, he said, very low. Mr. Trefaro says the next 24 hours. Your Grace, she is going to be well. It was not a question, and Moren did not contradict him. He sat on a low footstool at the bed's foot, his elbows on his knees. He did not speak for almost an hour. When at last he did, he said, without turning his head, she has spoken to you. She has, Your Grace, of all of it, including the part where you have been, in her words, behaving like a man with a fever you do not know the name of. The Duke laughed. It was a single, soundless breath, the sound of a man caught. Moren, he said, yes, Your Grace, I am going to ask you something. I am going to ask it badly. I require you to hear it well. I will, Your Grace. He turned his head. His eyes, in the lamplight, were not slate. They were the color of wet bark in the spring. I am not asking you to marry me tonight. I am asking you only to know, now, what I have known since you did not need a thing said to you twice in the Green Library at Ravenscombe. I am asking you to know it because my mother is asleep in this bed, and she believes that I am capable of saying it aloud. I will not have her wake tomorrow morning and find that she has been wrong about me. Yes, Your Grace, tell me what you understand. Moren could not at first speak. Her throat had closed. She forced it open by an act of will. You are telling me that you love me. The Duke held her eyes across the body of his sleeping mother. Yes. That is what I am telling you. She did not answer. He had not asked her for an answer. He had asked her only to know it, and she knew it, and the knowing of it sat in her chest like a small lit lamp she did not yet dare to set down. The rain fell on the windows. The clock struck 9, and 10, and 11. At 11:15, Mrs. Penderrow came to the door with hot broth. The Dowager opened her eyes. She looked from her son to Moren and back, and her mouth, the side of it that had not been unhelpful, lifted very faintly. Good. You have had your conversation. Now I should like my broth, and after my broth I should like to sleep until morning, and tomorrow I should like to sit up. I have a wedding to plan. The Duke bent his head. Maren saw his shoulders briefly shake. Then he leaned forward and kissed his mother's forehead and said, into her hair, "Mother, you are impossible." "I am," said the dowager. "Maren, child. The broth." Maren lifted the bowl and fed the dowager, slowly, in small spoonfuls, while the Duke watched from the footstool with an expression she had not, until that night, understood that any human face was capable of arranging itself into. Then the dowager slept again. The 9th day arrived clear and cold, and the letter from Silas Holloway arrived with it. It came not to Whitmore and not to Ravenscombe, but to the editor of a weekly broadsheet at Hexham, who knew the names mentioned in it, and sent a copy by fast rider to the Duke with a covering note. "Your Grace, before I print, I should like to know whether you wish me to print." The Duke received it at 1:30. He brought it directly to the morning room at Whitmore. The accusations were elaborate, that Maren had conducted an improper correspondence with the draper of St. Aldwyn, that she had been seen leaving a tavern at midnight with a man not her father, that she had stolen £140 from her uncle's strong-box, the sum the Duke had now mysteriously discharged, that her mother had not been the woman of unblemished character her family had presented her as. There was a forged letter in a hand almost, but not quite hers. "We answer this in a different room," the Duke said. "Mine, at Ravenscombe, tomorrow afternoon. I am calling every magistrate within 30 miles, every clergyman of consequence in St. Aldwyn, the editor himself, and Lady Brockton Vane and her sister both. They will come because I have, in 6 years, asked nothing of any of them. They will hear, from me, from Lady Hesper, from my mother, from Mrs. Honor Ainsley, who has been sent for, and from Miss Holloway herself, the truth of every accusation." He turned to Maren. "You will speak last. By the time you speak, the room will be ready to hear you." The afternoon at Ravenscombe came. They came. The magistrates, 8 of them. The clergymen, 6, including the rector of St. Aldwyn who had buried Maren's mother 11 years before. The editor came. Lady Brockton Vane came in lavender silk. Her sister Letitia came in dove gray, and would not meet Maren's eyes. The draper spoke first and produced his trade letters. He had no correspondence with Miss Holloway of any kind. The landlord of the Wheel and Anchor produced his book of patrons, which showed what the Duke had said it would. The magistrate of St. Aldwyn read the sworn statement of the tinker Aldous Penn, who had admitted, for 5 shillings, to swearing to a thing that was not so. Mrs. Honor Ainsley spoke of a girl who had read 4 languages by 11 and taught the Sunday school at 13. The rector of St. Aldwyn pressed his fingers briefly to his eyes. The dowager spoke from a chair brought forward for her. She listed the work of 8 years, the names, the outcomes. The numbers were small, the outcomes were not. The Duke spoke briefly. He said that the woman they had come to discuss had been called, at a public gala, his mistake, and that he had heard every whisper said about her in that gala and every whisper said about her since, and that he had made no mistake of any kind, and would consider any person who continued to suggest otherwise to be misinformed in a manner he was prepared to correct. Then he sat down, and Maren stood. "My name is Maren Holloway. I am the daughter of a saddler of Cobbler's Row in the parish of St. Aldwyn, and of a curate's daughter who is buried there. I have, in my life, stolen one thing. It was an apple in the market at Lanthorpe, and I stole it in the eyes of one man only, who was holding the wrist of an 8-year-old child, and the wrist was already bruised. I confessed to that theft in front of a crowd, because I had been raised by a woman who would have done the same." She turned, slightly, toward the row where Lady Brockton Vane and her sister sat. "I do not hold against either of you the words said to me at the gala. The next whisper, in any room in this county, that calls me a mistake, will be a whisper made in full knowledge of what has been said here this afternoon. I trust to your good sense, ladies, that you will know what to do with that knowledge." She sat down. The rector of St. Aldwyn rose slowly to his feet and inclined his head to her, and sat, Then, one by one, every magistrate in the room, and every clergyman, and the editor with his clerk. Lady Brockton Vane rose last. She did not incline. She curtsied. Her sister Letitia did the same, half a heartbeat later, with her eyes still on the carpet. By the time the broadsheet went to press the following Friday, the story it printed was the Dowager's story. Silas Holloway received his copy by Saturday's post. The magistrate of his parish had paid him a visit on the Wednesday afternoon. He left the parish before sunrise on the Thursday and was not heard of again in the county. The Dowager came down to breakfast on the morning after the room at Ravenscombe. She came down on her own feet, with Lady Hesper at her elbow, and she sat at the head of the breakfast table at Whitmore in a dressing gown of plum-colored wool, and announced that she would like to show Maren something. After breakfast, child, in the small parlor, you and I. Hesper, you may join us. Nathaniel, you will not, because what I am about to show her is a thing of women's keeping. Mother, said the Duke. Hush. The small parlor was a paneled room with a tall window onto the south garden and a writing desk of dark walnut. The Dowager sat by the window. Lady Hesper took the chair opposite. Maren sat between them on a low embroidered stool that had, she realized only when she was on it, been placed for this purpose and no other. The Dowager drew, from a pocket of her dressing gown, a small brass key. The desk, child, the deepest drawer on the right. Open it. Maren opened it. Inside was a wooden box, plain. She lifted it out, fitted the key, and the box opened. It was full of letters, bound packets, each tied with a different colored ribbon, each labeled in a clear, small hand on a strip of cream paper tucked beneath the knot. The names on the strips were women's names. There are 17 packets in this box. Each is the correspondence of one woman I have helped since my sister died. Lady Hesper has the same box at her own house, with women she helped before we worked together, and several from her own mother's keeping. The two boxes between them hold the lives of more than 30 women. Maren held the box on her lap. There is one packet I would like you to read. It does not belong in this box. It belongs in Lady Hesper's. She lent it to me 18 years ago, on the morning I first wrote to your mother. The third from the top. The ribbon is dark green. Maren lifted it. The strip said, Imogen Cleaver, of the parish of St. Aldwyn. I do not know that name. You do not. She was the wife of the curate of St. Aldwyn in the year before your mother was born. She was widowed in childbed. She had no family willing to receive her. The parish would not keep her. Lady Hesper's mother brought her to Whitmore. She lived in this house, child, in the room you now sleep in. She recovered. She trained as a teacher. She went, in the year your mother was 4, to keep a school in St. Aldwyn. She taught your mother to read. She taught her also to love the 4 languages your mother went on to teach you. She died when you were 3. There is in that packet a letter from your mother, written when you were 6, in which she asks whether this house might, one day, do for her daughter what it had done for Mrs. Cleaver. If the day came when her daughter required it, I gave her my word. It has taken 18 years, but I have kept it. You are not in this house by accident. Maren could not for some time speak. She held the packet in her lap. The ribbon was old and faded almost to the color of moss in winter. Her mother's hand, on the topmost letter, was a hand she had not seen in 11 years, and the sight of it was a small physical blow, and she absorbed the blow and did not weep. Lady Hesper said softly, You are part of a longer line than you have been told, my dear. The Dowager said, There is a girl at Tarn Cross, 15 years old, whose mother wrote to me last autumn. There is a great deal of work that will fall, in time, on the wife of the Duke of Ravenscombe. I am telling you today, child, so that you understand, before he asks, what you are being asked to take up. Not a title, not a house, a box, this box, and the next, and the women who are not yet in either. Maren closed the box. She locked it. She held the key on her open palm, and the Dowager nodded, once, and did not take it back. In the Green Library at Ravenscombe Hall, 2 evenings later, the Duke stood at the window with his back to the door, exactly as he had stood on the night of the gala, and Maren came in and closed the door behind her. He did not turn. Maren, he said. Yes, your grace. I told you, on the night of the gala in this room, that I do not say things I do not mean. I told you, on the night of my mother's collapse, that I love you. I am about to ask you a question that has an answer in it. Will you turn me down before I ask? If you mean to turn me down, it will be kinder. Maren crossed the room. She laid her hand against the back of his. I do not mean to turn you down. He closed his eyes. Then he turned, took both her hands in both of his, and said, Maren Holloway, of the parish of St. Aldwyn, of the saddler's shop on Cobbler's Row, will you marry me? I will, your grace. Nathaniel. I will, Nathaniel. He bent his head over their joined hands, and stood that way for a long count, and Maren lifted her free hand and laid it against the back of his neck, and felt him shake once, briefly, beneath her palm. When he lifted his head, his eyes were wet, and he was smiling, and the smile was not the loosening at the corner of his mouth, it was the whole face. Then he kissed her. When they broke apart, he said, against her hair, We will be married in the chapel at Whitmore. My mother insisted. Before midsummer, there is one further thing. Yes, the box. My mother has given you the key. I should like, when we are married, for there to be a third box, yours. I should like it filled, in time, by women you have helped. Will you give me that? Yes, she said. I will give you that. Then we are settled, Nathaniel. In the corridor outside, on a bench beneath the painted eyes of armored men who had, since the night of the gala, lost a great deal of their menace, Lady Hesper sat with the Dowager. When the door opened, the Dowager rose without assistance, walked the 4 steps to Maren, and put both her hands against Maren's cheeks. You will do, child. You will do very well. They were married on the 11th of June in the small stone chapel in the park at Whitmore by the rector of St. Aldwyn, who had buried Maren's mother. The Dowager had refused to invite anyone whose attendance would have been an act of curiosity rather than affection. Mrs. Honor Ainsley traveled down from the north and sat in the 3rd pew. Maren's father, in a coat made for him by the draper of Cobbler's Row, sat in the 1st pew and wept quietly through the entire service. Maren wore a gown of cream silk, simply cut, with a single string of small pearls at her throat. The pearls had been her mother's. She carried no bouquet. She had asked, instead, to carry a folded square of faded blue ribbon in her left hand, and the rector, when he saw it, did not need to ask whose ribbon it was. The Duke stood at the altar in the dark green coat he had worn on the night of the gala. His face was the face of a man about to receive a thing he had not believed himself entitled to. Maren walked the aisle on her father's arm. Her father, when he gave her hand to the Duke, looked the Duke in the eye, and the Duke inclined his head to him and said, Sir, in a voice low enough for only the front pew to hear, and Maren's father returned to his seat with his back straighter than it had been in 11 years. When the rector pronounced them married, Nathaniel did not kiss her in the chapel. He waited until they were on the chapel steps in the June sun, and there, in front of every person who had come, he kissed her, briefly and unmistakably, in the manner of a man making a statement he intended every observer to remember. 6 months later, on a cold December morning with the first frost on the south garden, a small cart drew up at the side door, and a girl of 17 got out with nothing but a bundle of clothes and a face that was the face of a person who had walked, that morning, the last 7 miles of a road she could not survive walking another mile of. Maren, who had been at the writing desk in the small parlor, rose at the sound of the cart and went to the side door herself. The girl on the step said, in a voice of great care, I have come from Tarn Cross, my lady. Her ladyship the Dowager wrote to my mother in October. My mother said I should come. Maren held out her hand. Come in, child. You will be cold. We have been expecting you. The girl came in. That afternoon, while the girl from Tarn Cross slept in a guest room with a fire lit in the grate, Maren sat at the desk and wrote, in a clear, small hand on a strip of cream paper, the girl's name, and the date, and the parish she had come from. She tied a length of faded blue ribbon around an empty packet, slipped the cream paper beneath the knot, and laid the packet, gently, in the 3rd box. Then she closed the box and locked it with the brass key on the chain at her throat, the chain that also carried her mother's pearl. the chain she had worn on the night of the gala, when she had walked into a marble hall of 300 strangers and been called the Duke's mistake before the music had begun. She had walked that night, with nothing but a borrowed gown and a single pearl and a quiet, frightened decision not to break. She walked, today, in a house that was hers, with a key that was hers, with a husband whose voice rose. Just then, from the corridor beyond the parlor door, asking after her, she rose and went to him. Behind her, on the desk, the third box sat in the winter light with its first packet inside, and the empty space above it where the second packet would go, and the third. For as long as she had hands to write the names with, and a husband at the door who would, she now knew, never again ask her to break for anyone. Thank you, friend, for staying with Maren through every whisper, every letter, every firelit room. If her story has reminded you that the words other people use to name you are not the words that hold, and that the people who hear those words and answer for you are worth more than the people who never had to, I should be very glad to know it in the comments below. The stories on this channel exist because of you. Until the next one finds us, take care of yourself.